Hey everybody, in this video we're going to be talking about an export subsidy. That's right, under the umbrella of international trade, we're going to talk about an export subsidy and show how to graph an export subsidy. First of all, I want to talk about what is an export subsidy, and it's pretty straightforward. The name gives it away. It's a situation that we're going to give the domestic producers a subsidy for every good they export. Now, when you study international trade, you'll also study production subsidies probably. Well, what is a production subsidy? Again, the name gives it away. That's a situation we're going to give a subsidy for every good produced. So there's a difference here. In one situation, we're going to give a subsidy for just every good that's exported. The other one, we're going to give a subsidy for every single good produced, okay? So what does that mean? It means with the export subsidy, when we sell to domestic consumers, no subsidy is going to be provided to the domestic producers, okay? Again, that is what is different from a production subsidy. Now, we're going to get to the graph here, but here is the key to understanding the graph that we're about to do, okay? So the next maybe 60 seconds is the key thing that you want to understand. We are doing a small country model, okay? And in a small country model, what that means is the domestic producers can export all of their goods as much as they want and earn price world, okay? That's very important. The domestic producers, so we're assuming they're a small country, right? It's called the small country model. They can sell as much as they want to international markets and earn price world. Now remember, what we said is every time they sell a good to international markets, that's an export, they're gonna get paid a subsidy. So here's the key. They will not accept a lower price from their domestic consumers than what they can earn in international markets. Remember what I said about international markets, right? They can sell as much as they want to those international markets at price world and then earn a subsidy on top of that. So there's no way they're gonna sell anything to the domestic consumers at less than price world plus the subsidy. That's a big key, all right? Now, with the model, we're gonna do a wedge, okay? We know at Econ Busters, or if you've watched any of these videos, you might know at Econ Busters, we love wedges, okay? The general reason we like to use wedges with models is it simplifies things. We get rid of shifting curves, which can be very confusing to read the graph afterwards. But the other thing is what oftentimes when we're using wedges, we're splitting PC from PC from PP, okay? PC domestic from PP domestic. But that's not the case here, okay? So this is one of the very few times we're gonna use a wedge and PC domestic is gonna equal PP domestic, but it's still good to use a wedge, all right? Let me walk you through it and see what you think. I think you're gonna see this is a pretty simple model, all right? So again, here's the key. The price that the domestic producer is gonna earn is gonna be PW plus the subsidy because again, every good they sell to international markets, they're gonna earn PW plus the subsidy and they will not sell at a lesser price than PW plus the subsidy to their domestic consumers, okay? Now, when we bring in the wedge, we can actually bring it in from the left or the right. It's probably best to bring it in from the right to stay consistent. It's a subsidy, and I generally say bring the subsidy in from the right because that's gonna show the increase in production, okay? So, like always, the most important part of a wedge is this vertical distance right there. That is the per unit subsidy. That is definitely the most important part. The base of this wedge is going to be price world, okay? So the wedge is going to slide along price world because they're getting price world plus the export subsidy. And the hypotenuse, if you will, of the wedge is going to be supply domestic, all right? So we're just going to slide that thing in and there's my height, I don't know, about right there. That's, again, the per unit subsidy, right? There's the base of it. Try to get that in just like that. And there's the hypotenuse. There's that subsidy wedge. Now, right off the bat, we can see that domestic production is going to increase. So here we go. Pre-subsidy, it was just free trade, and this was a net exporter, okay? Just to remind you really quickly here, this is price autarky. If price world is above price autarky, that country has the comparative advantage, okay? Or at least many of their producers have the comparative advantage, so much so that they will be a net exporter of the good, okay? The key is PW being above price autarky. So they're an exporter, and how much would domestic producers be producing under free trade? Well, PW intersecting the supply domestic right there, so we'll bring that down. Quantity supplied domestic. But now the fact that they're earning more money than price world by that amount is going to cause them to move along. We're going to give this a movement along, right? Price producer domestic is going up. When prices change, we move along curves. That's an increase in the quantity supplied, okay? So I can bring that down. Quantity supplied domestic. So one big takeaway is domestic producers are now going to produce more. How much more? That amount more. Why? Price went up by that amount right there, which caused that movement along the curve. Now, why do I sometimes want to bring this particular subsidy from the left, this export subsidy? Well, I'm going to go ahead and try to bring that in. It would be about right there. In fact, let me do the best I can to bring this across, right? So it's not the straightest, but just imagine that was a straight line. Hopefully I did a little bit better. Anyhow, there's my dot. So we could also call this the subsidy wedge. Why am I often tempted to bring it in from the left? Because it kind of reminds me price consumer is going up, okay? When I bring that in from the left, I go, okay, that's right, the price consumer is going up. See, this is the domestic demand curve. We're gonna get a decrease right there in the quantity demanded domestically. Again, why? Because domestic consumers are gonna have to pay PW plus the export subsidy because producers can earn that in international markets, sell as much as they want to international markets, so they're not gonna sell to domestic consumers at anything less they could earn in international markets, which again is PW plus the export subsidy. All right, so what does that mean? That this is PC domestic. PC for price consumer, the domestic consumer is gonna pay that amount, and that's right, PP domestic. We're actually not splitting the PC domestic and PP domestic. They're the exact same. This is what they're going to earn. And just to remind you, for an export subsidy, they're not going to get any subsidy when they sell to domestic consumers. So when the domestic consumer pays that amount to the domestic producer, that's all they're going to make because the domestic producer is not going to get a subsidy, and that's why it's not split. Okay, one of the very few times that a wedge, tax wedge or subsidy wedge, is not splitting PC and PP. All right. Now, that's pretty much the main stuff we want to get out of this, all right? But let's go ahead and do a welfare analysis, A, B, C, and D, all right? What's going to happen for the domestic consumer, okay? So I'm going to put a little delta consumer surplus. They're going to lose out, right? They used to make PW to the demand curve and on up. That used to be their consumer surplus. Now PC to the demand curve and on up. They're going to lose out on A and B. So they're going to lose minus A, minus B, right? Because their price went up. Next, let's go ahead and do the delta on producer surplus. This is the domestic producer, okay? For them, they used to make this was their producer surplus. See that triangle right there? That was their producer surplus. Their price went up, and when it went up, their surplus went just like that, right? Went all the way to there and there. So they picked up A, B, and C. So we're gonna put plus A, plus B, plus C, all right? Not the best B, let's try to make that a little clearer. A, B, and C. Now let's do the government outlay, right? The government is also affected. What's the government outlay? Well, what are the amount of exports now? Exports under free trade was that amount, this horizontal distance. Now exports are actually going to be this amount. Why? Domestic consumers are buying less, domestic producers are producing more, exports went from here to there. Since this is the amount of exports and that's the per unit subsidy, this entire rectangle is the government outlay. Hopefully that's clear. Minus B, minus C, and minus D. Now, if we do the cross out, all right, here's what we get. A's cross out, B's cross out, C's cross out, B and D drops to, what do I mean by it drops? It drops down to show this is my change in social surplus for the domestic country. So how is the domestic country impacted? Minus B, minus D, you can kind of call that the deadweight loss, if you will. Hope that makes sense to you. The key to an export subsidy, I am telling you, it is use the wedge. Remember, there was about 60 seconds in there where I explained why that price consumer is going up and why the wedge is going to behave the way that it does. Go back, watch that 60 seconds again if you got any confusion. Once you get that down, everything else just falls into place. One last thing maybe before we close out the video. I've kind of already said this, right? Here again was how much the domestic consumer was buying, and the amount the domestic consumer is now buying is less, right? And again, the amount the supply of from the domestic producers grew from here to there, right? And so what is going to be my exports now? From here all the way out to there, which we've already said, right? We've already had that down. There's my exports, bring it down. There's my exports. Just wanted to show you that on the x-axis just as we ended the video. Hope that made sense to you. Hope that made it clear. Hopefully it makes export subsidies easy for you. We'll see you in the next video.